Hi, and welcome to our second section about serverless uses in AWS. So it's really interesting to see what people think that you can do with serverless, and actually you can do almost anything. So let's review what we are going to do in this section. Our first thing that we are going to talk about is going to be the common usages of serverless in AWS. What kind of things you're going to see. And we have a kind of a list that I'm going to show you demos about. The first being the backend implementations. So, of course, the first thing that you're coming to think of is Lambda Function. And Lambda Function execute code, so you can just go ahead and build your own backend. It actually goes really well with microservices, which is very trendy these days. So, yeah, you're sure you can make your Lambda Function in DynamoDB, and it's one thing and it's awesome thing, but we can do so much more with serverless. The second thing is DevOps. In the cloud you have a lot of DevOps operation to do. You need to back up things, you need to update things, you need to do a lot of maintenance, a lot of operations that you want them to be automatic. And of course, the serverless techniques and architecture does make less maintenance, as we saw before, but you still have to make some maintenance. For instance, you have your DNS records and you want to back up them once a day. So this is a dev operation, a DevOps things that you need to do, and you want to be able to do it easily. So we are going to utilize serverless services to make DevOps operation. The last thing that we're going to talk about is the CDN edge location, where you could see how we utilize serverless to do different things than development and application layer. It's going to be a really interesting video. So let's dive into our first video, which will be implementing API with API Gateway and Lambda Function. So we already saw Lambda Function and we are aware that it's executing our code, and we know that there is some triggers out there that we can use, but we haven't really connected the dots. We haven't took a Lambda function and execute it using some trigger. So our first trigger is going to be an API gateway, an API that you expose through Amazon, and it's going to be integrated to Lambda and with the API gateway, and with that creating a full API which is scalable and, as I love, simply no maintenance at all. So this is a diagram, a very simple diagram that you can see. So you have the API gateway and you have the Lambda function, and the API gateway is going to get the request from the user and proxy it into the Lambda function as it is. It is important to say that the API gateway can do so much more than that, but in this video we're going to focus about the integration part to Lambda function. So let's go to our AWS console and start do what we love to do, and that is to create things in AWS and code them. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new Lambda function. And our Lambda function is going to be something really simple at first, and we're going to add some content into it. So we have our API. And again, we need to choose a role and create a function, and we do have a function. I do want to do one thing. I want to do console.log and log the event, so we will be able to see what am I getting from the API gateway. So you have another option here, not only to log it, but when we are going to save it, we are going to choose the configuration test event. And of course, you can just hit here an API and you can see here the API Gateway AWS proxy. And this is going to simulate what we are going to get from the API Gateway. And you could see here that we are getting the headers, and any headers that you're used to work with in HTTP is going to be available here. And the query string parameter and the stage, the current stage, which actually means like an environment. So this is an interesting thing because we can see that in AWS mindset, they are already supporting environments. And this is really cool because your QA is in AWS, your staging, your production, and you can get here what environment are we working at so we can act accordingly. The identity of the caller, everything related to authentication, and of course body itself. And last thing that I wanted to show you is that we can get what kind of resource we are getting. So let's go down here, okay, and the path. This is the path to our resource. You know, HTTP or even REST API using resources to specify what I want to do. So I can do it either in this path or we can see it in another way in the API Gateway. So let's call it API Payload and create. So we have this function, it's created, it's provisioned, and now what we need to do, we need to integrate an API. So let's go to services and hit API. And we get here NPI. Build, deploy, and manage API. Okay, so now we're gonna create a new API. And our API will be first API. Okay, so we can create an API from scratch. We can clone an existing one. We can import from Swagger. So if you're familiar with Swagger and you already have a definition how your API looks like, you can just import it. Or you can take some example one. We will go with a new one, so we will see everything from scratch. First API. Let's create the API. So now our API is created, but one thing is important, it's not deployed yet. So when you want to deploy it, you need to deploy the API. We will get to that in a second. So now we're specifying the resources. So we are at the root resource / so we can just go ahead and create a method. So I want to do a GET request. The reason that I'm doing GET request is that it's simply easier to test. We can issue a GET request from our browser without doing anything, so it will be easier. And now we have created the method, and now we need to choose what kind of integration are we going to do. The first one, the one that we are going to talk about in this course, is a Lambda function. Lambda function simply integrates with API Gateway and it receives the data and acts accordingly. You can invoke any other AWS service that you want, and you can actually execute commands within the service using API Gateway. It's a really cool thing. So if you want to in-queue something into SQS, you can do that directly from your code through API Gateway into the SQS without writing any code. You can use some mock data. You can use another API URL, but we will focus on Lambda function. So now you need to choose your region, because when you are going to execute the API, you need to have a function. So our function is in Ireland, and we are looking to the API. And let's hit save. And now Amazon is telling us that it's going to give permissions to the API Gateway to invoke Lambda function, and that's fine with us. So now it is saving. And now you can see the map, the diagram, where your request is going to be executed. So the client is going through the method request, and you can see here a clue what it's supposed to do. It's actually interfere. It actually inspects the request and can say that you have authentication or not authorized. So in this case it's none, so anyone can access it. Then what we're doing is integration with the Lambda function, and I think that I forgot to do something, and that will be to use the Lambda function proxy. That is important because that is conveying the entire request into the Lambda function. Okay, so let's go back here. So we have the GET request and we have the integration, and we are going to do the response. Let's see that it got updated. Didn't. Okay, great. So now we are ready to test it. So we want to deploy it. Once we're deploying, we're going to be asked by Amazon, what kind of deployment stage is it? Is that QA, production, staging? You can do whatever you want. So let's call ours QA and deploy. So this is our URL, and you can see that the URL contains a /QA. And now you can also see that we invoke the Lambda function, and the Lambda function returned internal server error, which is really strange, right? Because it was supposed to return something. So let's go back to a Lambda function and see our code. So we want to go to the monitoring first and try to understand if it got invoked or not. I think it didn't update yet because it was supposed to get updated. Okay, so now we're in different view, and you can see that this dot here specified that there was one execution. So it got executed but didn't do what we expected to do. So now we're going to try and understand why it happened. The reason is that we didn't actually do anything with the request, right? We just returned callback and hello from Lambda. And this is a bit problematic because we need to say what is the response code, what is the address that you want to respond, what is the body that you want to respond. So let's create an object called response. And we will initialize it with two attributes. The first one is the status code. It will be 200 because everything is okay and we're happy about it. And we can also return the body. This is a string here, so let's say hi from API Lambda. And take this response and replace it with this string. And now we're gonna hit save. Now let's rerun it. Okay, and we got hi from API Lambda. And we can also try and inspect here the network, and we are going to see here the request itself, and we're going to see that the status code is 200. So this is basically how we create an API gateway.